Hey y'all, Zach McDonald, your real estate agent with Real Property Associates, and this is my Seattle housing market watch for August 15th, 2025. We just had the hottest couple days of the summer here in Seattle. Maybe not quite, but it sure felt like it, at least back to back. And we're starting to see the housing market heating up just a tiny bit. If you watched my most recent market updates that I put out last week, you would have heard me talk about how I think that the housing market is in this transition point where we might see it start to get a little bit more competitive, especially with the talk around interest rates and even with interest rates dropping just a little bit for mortgages already, and also with the inventory starting to decline. And those two different factors could cause the housing market to become a lot more competitive later in the fall and also in the winter here in the Seattle housing market. Now, if we look at the past week and we look at the Market Watch stats, we're seeing the listing numbers continuing to be slower. We did see a little bit more new listing activity in King and Snohomish County here, 735 listings versus it was 698 the week before, but still really close to the same numbers and a lot less than we were seeing in the summer. And this is completely normal to see that number starting to slow down heading into the fall. What we're also seeing is continued buyer activity. So this last week, 768 pending sales versus 792 the week before. And in both cases, more than the amount of new listings coming on the market. And so what we're seeing is the supply number or the amount of houses available starting to decline in King and Snohomish County. We've been seeing this the past few weeks, and that number continues to go down. And what this does is it causes the buyers to be looking at fewer houses and choosing or fighting over, if you want to get into the bidding war type of language, the same houses. And in our case, we're still in a market, and again, this would have been in the update last week, where we have a lot of supply relative to the buyers. We have a few months, 2.5 months or so in King and Snohomish County, but those numbers are getting smaller, not bigger, which they were doing when we were in the early part of the summer. Now, mortgage rates have been hovering around 6.5% over the past couple weeks. Mortgage News Daily's most recent survey has mortgage rates at 6.56%. If we look back a couple weeks ago to the end of July, when I filmed the most recent Market Watch, we had mortgage rates at 6.75%, so just a tad under 7. And if we look at the rest of these stats, my favorite part here of these market watches now is looking at the pending sales data, because I think the pending sales data, although we were looking at that, we weren't really getting numbers. We were getting more numbers of listings sold. We weren't getting to see, hey, what are houses selling for? What are the amounts over asking price? How many houses have multiple offers? So I really like the new data we've been looking at. And if we look at King County as a whole, we're seeing that houses were selling $965 median sales price, and the amount of the list price, people were receiving about 99%. So houses were selling just below the asking price in King County. That would be a little bit less than a couple weeks back. When we looked at the end of July, we're actually seeing a little bit of the multiple offers. And I mentioned that in that video. If you want to hear some more thoughts about the market starting to transition, that's when I started talking about it. But we did see asking price on average. But we're now again seeing just below asking price. My guess, some of those houses that had been on the market for a little while starting to sell as the supply numbers dwindle a little bit. And the reason I think it's that and not the market slowing down anymore is because what we're seeing is a little bit of an uptick in multiple offers again and the escalation addendums. In King County, 26% instead of 24% a few weeks back for pendings with multiple offers. So just a slight uptick, but that's still significant. Couple percent more multiple offers. We also saw 2% more pending sales with escalation addendums, or the clause saying, hey, I'm willing to compete and fight over this. I'll pay more than the asking price, 11% versus 9%. So we saw a little bit more buyer activity and I would say the newer listings is when you normally see these escalation addendums, multiple offers. So some of the newer houses coming on are getting a little bit more excitement than they were earlier in the summer. And we're still seeing the financing addendums and inspection addendums. Those numbers are pretty similar, 69% versus 65%. With financing addendums, and then we saw 42% versus 40%. So a little bit more in the contingency realm. And this is, again, more confirmation to me that some of those listings that were on the market for a while were also selling. So you're getting a little below asking on average, and you're also getting those additional contingencies. That doesn't necessarily apply to those multiple offer scenarios. And so I think we've kind of have this maybe transition happening, right? Where we're seeing some of those other listings selling because inventory is dwindling, but we're also seeing a little bit more competition over the new and exciting ones. In Snohomish County, if we look at Snohomish County, similar experience, median sales price, $750,000 over the past couple weeks. We saw houses selling for 99% of the asking price on average, and that is the same as a few weeks back in the last market watch. But again, same trend here. We saw an uptick in the contingencies. So I'm going to cause you to wait here on the pendings with multiple offers, suspense keeping. There were 83% versus 77% of offers with that financing addendum. Again, that's what buyers want, right? They want to protect themselves. And the inspection addendum, same thing, 3% more inspection addendums included in the contracts. But we saw more escalations. So we saw 7% versus 6%. Again, this is really small, but again, a shift. 1% more had the escalation clause, and 2% more, 26 versus 24, exactly the same as King County, had multiple offers versus just a single offer. So overall, King and Snohomish County are both seeing the supply numbers starting to dwindle. So fewer listings on the market. They're also seeing a little bit of an uptick in the competition on listings, while at the same time, some of those houses that have been sitting for a while are starting to sell. And again, we're still in this market where a lot of, I would say, the houses have been on for 20, 30 days, but that's going to change pretty quickly once those houses are sold. The newer ones are starting to sell a little bit quicker, at least the ones that are in the most desirable locations, priced well. So I guess for buyers, and this is something I've been bringing up for the last month or so, the market that we're in right now might start shifting and becoming a lot more competitive over the next few months. It might not get hyper competitive right away, but what's going to change first are the amount of options that you have as a buyer to choose from. And for the sellers, I think you're starting to see a little bit more activity on the listings. It's still not a seller's market where everything is selling super fast and buyers are paying 15% over asking price. But I think it's good news that if you list your house right now, there are likely to be more buyers excited about it, and it might not take as long as some of the neighbors took to sell earlier in the summer. Thanks so much for tuning into this week's Seattle Housing Market Watch. If you got some value out of this video, please consider subscribing to the channel. And if you have any real estate needs in this area, if you're thinking about buying or selling somewhere in King and Snohomish County, I'd love to be a resource for you.